because I pulled up one of my blog posts that goes from Brisbane on down through Portland on its way to Amsterdam Island, and was the tail end of an alignment that I was tracking on up through Africa and the United Arab Emirates, and it took me up through Central Asia and down through Japan, and I ended up in Australia. But it's been an amazing process.
Yeah,
because that's how I get my information.
Yeah, I heard an interview with you where you were saying that you sort of came onto the mud flood by yourself and sort of figured it out, which was, I found interesting, and other people in other places were figuring it out at the same time.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that seems to be what's been going on. I did get connected by one of my, somebody in my community about the mud flood with a mud flood researcher, Baltimore Fats. And so I watched, he was just getting started himself, and he was looking at Baltimore. And when I saw what he was doing and then learned more about the mud flood, I said, we're all looking at the same things. And then I started to find the evidence of mud flood when I was doing my own research on the alignments.
Nice. So
and
to get into it, what is, can you sort of explain what you do, what the alignments are? Not everyone's seen all your videos.
Okay, so the basis of my work is finding what I call the North American star tetrahedron, when I connected cities that were lining up in lines in North America. And then I knew enough at that time from watching other researchers that whoever built this grid knew what they were doing and where they were, and were very precise. And I've got lines all over this old tattered map, but I ended up switching to a globe. And a lot of flat Earth debate on this, and my work's not driven by whether the Earth is a planet or a plane. I have come across information to support the idea that our perception of space and time has been tampered with in that way. Some really sketchy things going on, especially in the 1500s, that appear to have been directed at removing any traces that the Earth might have been flat and turning it into a globe.
Yeah.
So I'm open to the subject. It's just not what drives my work. If anything, the idea that the Earth is a torus is very appealing to me.
Yes. Yeah.
And that the ley lines work either way. I've just gotten so much information back from sacred geometry, which I knew about before I found that. And then, so when I switched to a globe, I was able to plot cities that were lining up in lines all over the Earth, as opposed to just on the flat map, as far as what I could see. It was just a lot easier for me. I'm sorry.
Do the patterns you're finding, do they change much if it is a globe or a flat plane?
I don't think so. I'm really not able to say that one way or the other, except that I believe it's according to sacred geometry. It was set up according to sacred geometry, which I learned about in 2007. And so I had a working knowledge of what sacred geometry was, what the shapes are, how everything comes together geometrically. And I think this original civilization knew all about that, because there's just so many correlations to that. So I find them in circles and in lines. And then I just go, and I've gotten most of my information from going to the places that I've put down on these spreadsheets. And it's like the history of the world opened up for me. Not only the original civilization, but what's been done to take it down, to hide it, to destroy it, to cover it up. The history that we're taught in school. How did they take over everything? And that's been really crystal clear in my research, as well as I find star forts on these alignments. I'm not necessarily, when I first started doing this, I wasn't expecting it. And then all of a sudden, I started looking for them every time. Railroads, rail lines, you know, I think the original civilization built all the infrastructure, including what we think was built in more recent times. I think they built all of it.
I agree. I totally agree with that. That's the way it looks. With star forts, have you looked into or thought about, like, are they representing the heavens at all? Is there any sort of information that says that it's like as above, so below kind of thing?
I think so.
Yeah.
I really do. I think they were harnessing energy, acting as some kind of circuitry on the grid system. The grid system was worldwide, which is why I believe it was peaceful. I don't think people were fighting each other. I think that came in as a later explanation, and you know, a lot of this infrastructure was destroyed in the conflicts, World War I, World War II. You know, ones in Korean War, Vietnam War. They were destroying infrastructure. You know, kind of in a crazy, insane way. I just finished doing research of modern history since 1945. It's going to be exclusive content on my Patreon and Unguru, which is a new platform that I'm on as an educator and publisher of hidden history. And I did pull up something that I wanted to share because I definitely want to focus on Australia in this presentation. But I want to make a point with what I was just talking about with wars, because you know what's taken place here is just horrible, and that's putting it mildly. I'm actually confident that something's going to happen soon that's going to change things, but there's definitely been this plan to take over everything, including us, for a long time.
Yeah, they've gotten away with it for a long, long time. But
they have been. But I'm actually kind of confident they're not going to get away with it. And I would say next couple of weeks it's going to be quite interesting.
I'm with you on that. Just on information, but also more my gut feeling, you know, from years and years of research. I agree. I'm just feeling.
I mean, you just look at.
Going to get out of this finally.
I mean, so this is part and parcel of how they did this. So the British and the Russians invaded Iran during World War II. Okay.
Yeah.
So they went in September of 1941, and they deposed this Shah at the time. The reasons for going into Iran was because they saw him as a German ally, even though he wasn't, and they wanted to secure the oil fields and supply lines in Persia. They replaced him by Muhammad Reza Pahlavi, the last Shah, as a young person. And then this Shah was overthrown in 1979 and replaced with the Islamic Republic of Iran. And this is what things looked like in 2012 over there. And before the revolution, this is what was there, you know, so definitely changes. But the point that I wanted to make, especially about Korean War, because we don't hear much about that. I had a great uncle who was a bombardier in the Korean War. He actually was a bombardier in the Navy, you know, the guy in the plane that drops the bombs. For World War II, it was like he was flying over the Pacific the entire time. I mean, it's amazing he survived.
Yeah.
But so I, you know a little bit, but I didn't know much about the Korean War. And let me get down here just a second. Okay. This point that I want to make. Okay, so they get together and they they split Korea at the end of World War II on the 33rd parallel.
Oh,
And the North became, socialist, supported by the Soviet Union, and the South became capitalist and supported by the United States. So right off the bat, you have two different political systems and two different economies. You're setting up a crisis by doing this. And it looks like it was absolutely done deliberately. And the same example with Vietnam, it was artificially split at the 17th parallel. I think it was the 17th. And the same situation. North became communist and South became capitalist, and boom, you have Vietnam.
divide and conquer.
And there's things about Vietnam as Southeast Asia that isn't well known, and that is that the neighboring country of Laos to Vietnam is per capita the most bombed country in history.
Mm.
And they weren't even directly in the conflict. So it just looks like it was covered just to destroy this original civilization by any means necessary or possible.
Definitely.
I think that's what's going on, and killing a lot of people. Sadly, but I think that's what we're talking about. The beings that are behind this hate us. They need us, and they're jealous of us, and they want what we have, and they can't, because it's not what they are. I don't think they're human.
No.
And so back to my point. Okay, so North Korea starts going into South Korea. UN says, we don't like the looks of this. We're going to send our troops over. The US got involved. China got involved on the side of North Korea. And all of a sudden, you have this situation where it's back and forth, where Seoul is captured in South Korea, but then the communist forces are driven back to the 38th parallel, it says, so somewhere in here, where it originally started, where it was split. So that would be here. North Korea was subject to a massive US bombing campaign. The war never was officially settled. It's still happening. I mean, there was never a peace treaty signed.
Yep.
And it was one of the most destructive conflicts of modern times,
Really?
with around 3 million deaths due to the war, and proportionally a larger civilian death toll than either World War II or the Vietnam War.
World War II?
Mm-hmm. Proportionally.
Oh, okay, yeah, but still.
For the size of it.
Wow.
And it caused the destruction of nearly all of Korea's major cities, and there were thousands of massacres on both sides. So this is the kinds of stuff that bubbles to the surface when you start scratching down. And this is the stuff we're allowed to know about. I mean, even though most people probably don't know that much about the Korean War, it's still easily available when you go looking for it. And it's all about death and destruction. And the other wars are as well.
Yeah.
So, and that's the unfortunate nature of what's been going on, but we haven't been told that. It's been wrapped up in a nice sounding package, and we're doing this because we have to, because of the bad communists,
Yeah.
or the bad capitalists, or whatever. So it's creating a dichotomy.
We're saving you. I mean, I remember in school, I always wanted to study ancient history, go figure.
Mm-hmm.
Always, and I ended up going, I actually went to like 6 schools, so I was always trying to get into the classes I wanted, and I never could get one. And then I think I started a new school in year 10, and they had ancient history, and I was just so excited, and I signed up, and literally the first day of school, they said, oh, no one was interested, we put you in normal history. So all I got through all of my schooling was World War I, World War II, Vietnam War. That was my history, because that's all they want us to know. It's this input, and it's not just the knowledge. It's the psychological persona they give us of we are these aggressive, violent, warring animals, when we're not. We're nothing like that. I've never met anyone who wanted to start a war. But this is it. They want to. They get our kids and us when we were little, and they say, "No, this is who you are. This is what you are. You're aggressive. Now go out in the playground and have a fight."
They get us to do our dirty work by getting inside our heads and educating us in this, or miseducating us.
Definitely.
You know, and thankfully, you know, like we were talking about, just a whole lot of people have woke up to this and are taking the bull by the horns. You know, I wasn't doing any of this before 2018.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, how many people have suddenly stepped up. I was the same. I'd sort of tried a bit in the past, you know, done a lot of study, but yeah, just I ended up breaking my hand, my finger, made a few videos, and you know, 2 years later, here I am.
Mm-hmm.
But people, I mean, it's to the point that you can't really deny that there's something else going on unless you're working at that, really.
Oh. I mean, I've been unplugged from mainstream media for years. You know, I watched TV when I was young, and really since I was 8, I'm 57, so since I was 18, haven't been interested in it, not been doing other things. My husband was a TV watcher, so I got a bit of a dose from him, but it still wasn't anything I was interested in, and you know, just not interested in it. But the good side of that is I'm not subject to that programming, you know, and the reinforcement of, you know, the propaganda and all the stuff they want, you know, they scare people into believing in.
This is very telling of how powerful, you know, media is, right? And media, of course, being the so-called Greek goddess of illusion. But this is the thing, you see, that they know we're the power down here. We're the creators, we're the power. Whatever we believe and whatever we direct our focus of thought at is what we create. And they can't do that. So their only choice is to control us and to control what we think. And through that, they create the world that they want. So it all comes down to our choice of deciding to turn off the telly and do a bit of research and believe something, you know, different than what we're told.
And I tell people, you don't have to go very far to find any of this. Just walk outside your front door and look at things with different eyes. And it's right there in front of you. And this is all over the world. I'm not exaggerating. There's no attention drawn to cut and shaped megaliths that are just, you know, everywhere. I mean, we're large stones with angles and straight edges, big. Big,
yeah.
You know, I can show you some other examples here. I might as well go through some places. This is my blog site, piercingtheveilofillusion.com, and I'm pretty close to 200 blog posts. I'm not quite there yet, but I've got a lot of stuff to go through, but everything is in there. And fortunately, I've always been a good writer and a good technical writer, but I didn't have anything to really write about until I got this information. You know, and before I started writing, I was just looking at, you know, drone videos and images from all these places, and I'm thinking, my gosh, everything looks the same. How am I going to get this, what I see, out to people? Because, you know, just talking about it doesn't do it justice.
Yeah,
it's so much more effective to show you, and this is going to be, you know, what I'm going to show you right now is going to be a really good example of that. You know, and I'll go through this, and then I'll try to find some other examples.
Definitely.
So I'm following this large circle alignment that starts in Amsterdam Island, and like I was saying earlier, these are the places I'm following it through. And the last leg of the journey was going through Australia on the way back to Amsterdam Island, which is just like a little speck in the South Indian Ocean.
Oh, okay.
And I have to say, you know, I feel like I'm being guided in many ways. It's an intuitive process. It's not a clairvoyant or clairaudient experience for me.
Yeah.
It's just, intuitive.
Yeah. Right.
But I have to say, to pick Amsterdam Island as a starting point, I must have had some help.
So how do you pick starting points? Is it just literally from your gut? You just
I think that was from my gut.
Yeah, right. So,
but I knew about Amsterdam Island because it had shown up on these alignments I was tracking, more than one, as far as I know. So for whatever reason, I picked Amsterdam Island as a starting point, and I'll show it to you at the end of this one, because this is the last leg of it. So starting at the entry point of Brisbane, this great dividing range.
Yep.
And this is the Brisbane on the Brisbane River. Am I saying it right?
Brisbane,
is it Brisbane?
Yep.
Okay. So if you compare the Brisbane River with the Red River, the Wed River in Manitoba, this is Winnipeg.
Yes, definitely. That's something I've been noticing a lot. I've been trying to work out what to call them, U shapes or something. But
I call them snaky S-shaped rivers.
Yeah. I've been noticing them in all the star cities, and they're always right in the middle, aren't they? With basically half the star on one side and half on the other.
And there's another bend in Brisbane, and then the Yangtze River in China.
Nice. And this is another narrative that we're told, that rivers always find a straight line as much as they can, to the point that we're given these billabongs, as we call them, but oxbow lakes, where you get those cut off. Basically, they say the river will go and it'll cut off any U shape because of pressure. It just wants to go straight, but we don't see that. It's not what we see when we look at the rivers. They're all like this. They're all curvy and windy.
It's exactly what I'm finding. And major rivers like, let me think. Well, the Thames looks like that too. And that goes through London. It has that S-shaped or U-shaped. They call it natural. They call these rivers natural. And when they have masonry banks.
Yeah, I know.
And oh, by the way, there are canals attached to these major rivers.
Yeah, yeah.
But the major river itself is natural.
Exactly, yeah.
And they tell us that with a straight face.
I know. I'm in Perth, and we've got the Swan River, and we've got those bends in it as well. And the Swan River is quite a big river, and yeah, the whole thing, masonry banks.
I can give you countless examples, and scattered throughout my blog.
And this
research.
is the thing, Perth, 1837. So what's that, 70 years old or something? So the first thing they did when they rocked up with their boat and their 20 people is they built huge buildings and put a man-made shore all the way along the river. It just doesn't make sense.
And they count on us not asking questions.
Yeah.
And I didn't ask questions. I started to wake up to this, I guess, really wake up to this starting in about 2012.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's when I really started. I had always been interested in it and attracted to it. And like you, I loved history, was interested in history, and I'm well traveled. I've lived in a lot of different places. And I would notice things over the years that I kind of filed in the back of my mind. Gee, that's weird. What's that doing there? And I learned about sacred geometry, like I said earlier, around 2007. And then I was connected to people that were like following a teacher named Drunvalo Melchizedek, who's kind of dropped off the scene.
Yep.
So I followed his work and what he was doing, and that was all part of my waking up to my spirituality, which is my belief. Like you said earlier, we're all the creator. We're all one. we're having a human experience on Earth. And that information's been removed from our awareness. And, so what's taken place here on so many levels is, it's beyond criminal. It's evil.
Oh, it is. Of course, evil is the opposite to live, and that's what these people are. They're against life. They're against the creation. Well, I shouldn't call them people, really, should I?
Yeah,
I guess people
they look human.
Yeah.
They look human.
They do.
But they're not.
Kind of.
They don't have human souls. So this is Brisbane around 1925 and 1926. Beautiful old architecture. And it was said to have been built on the location of a historic European settlement and one of the oldest cities in Australia, founded on ancient indigenous lands in 1825. So 100 years later, it's supposed to be looking like that. But unfortunately, there was a fire, another common story, very common.
Very common.
In 1864, 39 years after what we are told was the founding of the city, and burned out of control in the city's central business district for several hours, destroying several blocks of businesses and homes. So only, just a few, let's see, relatively short period of time, 39 years, it's already looking, you have what's left in the smoldering ruins. So these are the things that don't add up.
No, because remembering that Australia was, a very new colony, the story is that they turned up, which means they didn't know where, the clay was. They didn't know where the iron ore was and all this stuff, the raw materials, let alone did they have factories to turn it into stuff like bricks and girders and, it's just a ridiculous story, isn't it? But it's interesting that it said it was founded on ancient Aboriginal. I mean, that sounds to me like they've just moved into someone else's city. Maybe the people didn't want to leave, so they burnt it. I don't know. Maybe it was because Australia is a big. See, I'm told that they tell me that I'm a convict. I'm descended from convicts, sent out from England 7 generations ago. But I don't know if that story even makes sense. I have a feeling that there were white people here before 1788, as well as Indigenous Aboriginal people, because the whole story about horses on boats coming from England to Australia, a horse standing upright in a little stable for 6 to 9 months, and then I don't believe that that's possible.
There's other similar stories about animals. I did some research not too long ago about a linear alignment in North America, starting with San Antonio and going up to Buffalo, New York, San Antonio, Texas to Buffalo, New York. When I was looking into the research for San Antonio, I found the U.S. Army Camel Corps.
What? U.S. Army Camel Corps?
Camel Corps. That was, it was an experiment in the mid-1800s of using camels as pack animals in the Southwest.
Wow.
And they tell us that they went and got the camels from somewhere else and brought them over. And I just have to ask, how far is it a stretch to believe that they were already there?
Well, how much? How believable is it that they were transported on ships from Africa or Asia? I mean, because Australia's got camels too. Same deal. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, if you put a human in like a cell where they could only stand up, you fed them water and food, but they couldn't move for 6 to 9 months. I mean, that person probably wouldn't survive. And we're humans. We're not animals that basically run all day. I mean, a horse not being able to walk, let alone run for 6 to 9 months, or a camel. I mean, because the way that all bodies work, all physical bodies are pumps. Unless you're walking and moving, it doesn't pump the system, and it all shuts down.
Yeah, so the stories are endless to explain how things got there.
Ridiculous. Sorry, you keep going. I'll stop interrupting.
No, you're fine. Interrupt anytime. The Great Flood of Brisbane took place in 1893, 68 years after the city was established. And again, that's the kind of architecture we're talking about. Brisbane.
Could be any city in the world, couldn't it, really?
Right. And, I definitely think the fires were deliberately caused. Were the floods deliberately caused as well? I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, we seem to have a lot, don't we? Just in recent, the sort of 1850s to 1900s in cities like this, like flooded out cities. Weird.
Okay.
Is that
So
Walsh's
you heard of the Gympie Pyramid?
Oh, Gympie, yeah.
Say sandstone hill, terraced sandstone hill on private land and not open to the public.
Yep.
And then the Ballindine Pyramid. And this one is openly acknowledged to be man-made. However, it is said to have been in modern times when the landowner paid someone to do something with the surplus granite rocks that had been excavated for the land's agricultural use. And that's another common story. There's pyramids everywhere. They're just piling up stones.
And on that one there, that picture there, you can see the tops of stones in the grass. So it obviously goes down.
This one?
Ground.
Okay, so this is called the Pyramids in Unguru National Park, called natural granite rock formations.
Is that in New South Wales? Yeah.
It's in Queensland.
Oh, that's Queensland as well, yeah.
I think so. And then balanced rocks.
Oh, nice.
And that's also in the national park where this is. And you find balanced rocks everywhere, like in southeast Missouri.
Oh, wow.
Elephant Rock State Park. And Matopos Hills National Park in Zimbabwe. And like I just scratched the surface with these places. I mean, there's so much more to find.
Have you come across Walsh's Pyramid?
Which one?
It's called Walsh's Pyramid. It's in Cairns, far north Queensland. It's actually in the town of Gordonvale, just south of Cairns. I actually lived there like for a year, and I woke up every morning staring at this pyramid. But yeah, it's a big mountain that they call Walsh's Pyramid, and it looks like a pyramid. I
have looked at Cairns. I found it on an alignment, so I didn't find that when I was researching, but
just a little bit south of Cairns, yeah. And there's also up that kind of region. There's another one called Is it Black Mountain? Black Mountain, I think, which is another weird place up there. But I'll be quiet again.
Yes, okay. It's just same thing. I mean, there's pyramids everywhere.
Yep.
A lot of them have trees covering them.
Yeah. Like
they're very old.
Yeah.
But there's no attention drawn to them, and they're given names like Pinnacle and Pyramid, but they're not pyramids. They're not man-made, right?
Exactly.
Okay, this is off the Gold Coast at Brisbane, popular vacation resort. And then this is Los Olas Isles in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I can put more examples than these. particularly in the US, which I'm most familiar with, but I can find them in other places as well, these canal cities.
Yeah, I was just thinking, it's interesting, isn't it? Because they just appear, these places, don't they? It's like a lot of things. It's like, well, if it was there, how come no one knew? It's because they just say, oh, that's swampland and or industrial land. And then when they're ready to open it up, it's like, oh, look what we just built. Come on, have a look at ours. When all they're probably doing is dredging them out of it and cleaning it up. And because, I mean, when you look at the size of those canals, that's another massive, and this is one of the big things, isn't it? All these huge projects, and they're like, oh, no, we did that in 6 months. We did that in a year. No worries. You know.
And we've got, so this is a canal in Tajikistan, close to the border with Afghanistan. You know, I found canals all up through that way. This was a canal building civilization.
Yeah, not great.
Okay, let's see where I am right now. Okay, crossing the Great Dividing Range right now. Blue Mountains.
Three Sisters.
The Three Sisters, which have masonry-looking appearance.
Yeah, I think there's one. There's like a door in one of them.
And then this is Agatu Island at the far western end of the Aleutian Island chain, for comparison to the Three Sisters.
Oh, okay.
And that was on a different big circle alignment that I was following. That was off of Merida in Mexico.
So all these different features basically are landing on alignment lines or circles.
That's how I'm finding them.
Wow. Oh, Dubbo, that's where I was born.
So the old post office. And the same thing is found all over. For some reason, some of my pictures aren't coming up here. Let me see if I can refresh it and get them in there. You know, these impossible post offices built in the late 1800s, early 1900s, impossible architecture for the technology we're taught existed. You know, barely out of horse and buggy.
And the thing is with Australia is Dubbo's in the middle of nowhere. And we've got so many towns, like literally in the middle of deserts and things, but they've all got a big, massive red brick pub, and they've all got, you know, the post office and that. Well, how do they get all the materials out there, and why would you even bother? You know,
The courthouse in Dubbo, commissioned, we're told, in 1884 and completed in 1887. You know, how are they doing that? The band rotunda in Dubbo, and then this is in Hermosillo, Mexico. All of these rotundas and kiosks all over the world look the same.
Yep.
Just a few examples.
Bunker buoys as well, yeah.
And then and we talked about the S-shaped rivers. This is Murray River.
That one's got an island too. That's another. Have you noticed that? But a lot of them have islands. Mm-hmm. Near those bends.
Yes, they do. So this is one of the landforms on the Murray River, which this is Merrick Butte in northern Arizona. Geelong. This building was destroyed.
They what? They destroyed it.
It was demolished in 1923. The clock tower was demolished in 1923, and the remaining building was destroyed in the 1980s to make room for a new shopping center.
Oh, it's always a shopping center or a car park, isn't it? We must consume.
The old Geelong post office.
Geelong.
Said to be built between 1890 and 1891. That's when it was built. Tell us.
We're strange in Australia. We pronounce that Geelong.
Geelong.
Geelong, yeah.
Geelong.
Geelong.
So that's still standing.
Oh yeah. Oh, but yeah, it's been.
But what's that? Not there anymore. Whatever it was.
Yeah, right.
Portland. I find volcanoes all along these alignments.
Oh, okay.
And I really think that the ancients knew how to work with these elements, that there's a reason.
Well,
I find so many volcanoes.
They're working on thermal, energy and stuff now, aren't they? They're just starting to develop it. I mean, must be a lot of energy coming out of a volcano.
I think it was part of their technology or something. They knew how to work with the elements. I'm not saying I know how they worked with it. I'm just saying I've encountered volcanoes in places I didn't know had volcanoes, including Australia, and France has volcanoes.
Yeah, I didn't realize there was 3 volcanoes down there. Jeez. I mean, they tell us Australia has no volcanoes. That's what you hear. And they also used to say, that we can't have earthquakes because we're sitting on one tectonic plate, but the earthquakes keep happening. All righty. Well, thanks for your time, Michelle. That was, very interesting. Yes, and we might have to get you back at another stage to go into some more because you've done a lot of research. I'll also leave Michelle's the link to her website and YouTube below. Definitely go and check it out. Lots of information. What'd you say? 200 blog posts now. Lots and lots of videos.
It's getting close.
Getting close. And some really, really good research. So definitely check Michelle out. All righty. And thank you for your time. And we will chat again soon.
All right. Well, thank you, Campbell.
All right. You have an awesome day.
You too.